In this episode, we're going to try and tackle arrays. Now, arrays, as I mentioned in the last episode, are data types. They're a way of storing values in an iterative fashion. So an array will have lots of values inside it, similar to like what an object does, except these values will be one after the other. Now that will be quite hard to visualize, so let's just try and show you. The first thing we're going to want to do is get rid of everything from the last episode so that we have a completely fresh slate to work with. So before we start, you should just have an empty div like this. So an array can be defined as being a const. We'll give it a name, my first array, and it will equal open close brackets. So what we have here is an empty array. It's an array with nothing inside of it. If we wanted to fill this array, we can give it some values like so. Now this is an array of numbers. Notice how it's kind of similar to an object in that it stores values, except these values don't have to have names. You can just plonk the values right in there. Now the special thing about arrays is all of the iterative functionality that we can do to it. So we can use VS Code to show us some examples of those. If we type in my first array and then press the full stop, these are all the different things that we can do with an array. Now there is a lot of them. We're not going to go over every single one, but we're going to try and hit the most important ones in this episode. So if we take my first array and put him inside the HTML, and then do dot join, open close parentheses. So what join will do is add a comma after every single item in that array and make it visible to us. So if we save this and look at our web page, we should see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now join doesn't have to just use a comma. We can put whatever we want in there. So if we use a dash as a separator, save that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with the dashes. You can put whatever you want in there, as long as it's a string. Now if we hover over my first array, we'll see that the type is an array of numbers. So we can type that out like this. A number followed by open close brackets means that it's an array of numbers. Now an array can have any type inside of it, or multiple types. If we change this to a string, it will complain because obviously they're not strings. If we save that, we should see 1, 2, 3 the words. So the next array function that we can look at is called find. Now find can be used to find a value within an array. So what it's going to do is run once for each value in that array. So with our example, it could run a maximum of 3 times, 1, 2, 3. And it will keep running until it finds a match for what you've defined, or it reaches the end of the array. So if I show you what that looks like, we do find with open close parentheses, item equals greater than, which makes a little arrow, item equals 1. So there's some new things here that look a little bit confusing to us. The first thing to note is this triple equals. Now triple equals means equals. It's a very strict equals. It means the thing on the left is absolutely equal to the thing on the right. So this is our condition for the find. We're saying find me 1 that is equal to the word 1. An item here is the value of that iteration. So the item in the first iteration is 1, the item in the second iteration is 2, the item in the third iteration would be 3. So in this example here, the find will run on the first value, and it will see that item is equal to 1. So it will give us that value. So if we save this and look at the web page, we should see 1. If we change this condition to 3, so we're looking for the value that is 3, It will run once and say, no, that's not it. Run a second time, say, no, that's not it. Run a third time and say, there we are. And if we save that again, we should see 3. Now if we were to add something that's not in the array, it won't return anything because it can't find it within that array. So if we look back on the website, we've got nothing there. Now it's worth bearing in mind that find will only ever find the first one, and it finds 1 only. So if we had 2 items in there called 1, and we searched for 1, it's going to bring back the first one. Because it's found it, it can stop doing what it's doing. If we change the array to an array of numbers, and we say we want the item 3, that should work just the same. But obviously with numbers you can get a little bit more technical, and you can say, find me an item where item is greater than 4. And now that should get us 5. Because it will say, no, that's not, no, that's not, no, that's not, 4, no, that's not greater than 4, 5, yes, that's greater than 4. So the next array function that we can look at is called filter. Now filter, since it's a function, will look the same as find. It will perform a similar thing where it iterates over each value in the array, except this time instead of finding, it's filtering down the array. So if the value of the iteration doesn't meet the condition that you specified, it will be thrown out of the array. So in this example here, we're saying get rid of anything that is smaller than a 4. Only show me things that are greater than 4. So we should only have 5 if we save that. Now if we change this to anything that's greater than 1, we should get, that's incorrect, get rid of that, that's greater than 1, that's greater than 1, that's greater, that's greater. 2, 3, 4, 5. The next array function that we can look at is called a map. Now a map is used to do something for each iteration. So this is really handy for creating HTML. So if we say my first array map, and then we say make a div for each iteration, instead of one we want item. So now this should create a div for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 with those values inside of them. So if we save this and go back to the web page, we should see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, if we inspect, you can see these divs now exist. Like I said, maps are used to kind of do something for each iteration. So we don't have to just say a div with the item in it. You can do whatever you want. This number is so it's not just strings and numbers that you can store in an array. You can do objects as well. So let's make an array of objects where we've got a name of string and an age of number. Now this is going to complain because obviously they're just numbers. We're going to have to make a few objects here. So now we can look at a more realistic use case of arrays. If we create a new const down here called under 30s, and that will equal my first array dot filter, like we showed earlier. We're going to have to say item dot age is smaller than 30. So now we have a constant here called under 30s, which is exactly the same as my first array, but without these two. We've filtered out any of the objects that have an item called age and the value is over 30. So if we add a new line under this div and say under 30s, and then place the under 30s array here instead of the old one, and we're mapping over that, and for each one we're going to say my name is item.name. Now if we go back to our web page, we've got a list of the under 30s. So there's more things that we can do with this. We can have 3 jacks of different ages, and we'll make a new array called jacks, and it will be my first array dot filter, and we'll filter by name is equal to jack. Now if we replace under 30s with jacks, we should just get a list of jacks, because it's picking out all 3 of the jacks in there and getting rid of anything that is not jack. So here we're using a good combination of the filter array function and the map array function. Now these two are quite commonly used together. So these are the basic functions of arrays. The filter and the map especially are probably quite confusing to you. And if you didn't get it on the first time round, don't worry too much, maybe try watching the video again. But in future videos we're going to be using these things anyway, so you might be able to pick it up as you go along. If you are finding it very confusing, don't worry, because it is confusing. The only way you're going to get better at it is by practicing it. Try making arrays of numbers and strings. Fiddle around with the filter and maps. If you're feeling confident, try and make objects, and try and filter by harder things like the age. So that's all for the array functions for now. Like I said, we'll be doing some more in the future. In the next episode we'll go over the basics of functions.